Armin had never known the warmth of a family. He was born into the shadows of the city, abandoned as a baby on the steps of an orphanage that crumbled before he could even walk. When the building shut down, the children were scattered, some taken in by kind families, others disappearing into the abyss of poverty, and Armin was left with no one. At 12 years old, his life revolved around the streets, where survival meant begging for stale bread or searching trash bins for leftovers. His days were often cruel, but unlike others hardened by hunger, Armin's heart never grew bitter. He carried a quiet kindness, a flame that the harsh winds of misery could not extinguish. Each morning, he would sit on the corner of a busy market, his wide eyes following the rush of strangers who often ignored him, and yet, whenever he received a coin or piece of food, his first instinct was not to devour it but to think of someone else, someone more fragile than himself. Behind an old church that stood forgotten in the shadow of skyscrapers, a woman lay hidden beneath filthy blankets, her body thin as paper, her skin marked by time and pain. To the world, she was just another dying beggar, another faceless soul abandoned by fortune, but to Armin, she was someone who needed him. He first saw her on a winter night, shivering and gasping, her lips cracked from thirst. Something in her sunken eyes reminded him of loneliness, the kind he carried like a scar. That night, though he himself was starving, he split his only piece of bread in half and placed it in her trembling hands. Her voice was faint, like the whisper of wind. "Why would you give me this?" And Armin, in his childlike honesty, simply said, "Because you're hungry, just like me." From that night onward, Armin made it his mission to find food not only for himself but for her. If he earned one piece of bread, he shared it. If he found an apple in the trash, he polished it against his sleeve and offered it first to her. The woman, frail and weak, had no strength to speak much, but she began to watch this little boy with eyes that softened each day. She had been forgotten by her own family, left to fade in the margins of the world, but here was a nameless orphan who treated her as though she mattered. Slowly, with every crumb of bread, every sip of water, her strength flickered back like a dying candle being shielded from the wind. Sometimes Armin would hum little tunes to her, songs he had heard in the streets, and though her body was failing, she would smile faintly, as though she had not known kindness in decades. He did not know her name, nor her story, he only knew she was alone, and that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and against all odds, the woman's health began to improve. Her hands stopped trembling as much, her breathing grew steadier, and one day she managed to sit up and whisper, "You are saving me, little one." Armin only shrugged with a shy smile. "I just don't want you to die hungry." What Armin never knew was that this frail woman was not just a forgotten soul, she was Maryam Khan, the estranged mother of the city's most powerful billionaire, Zamir Khan. Years ago, Maryam had lived in palaces of glass and marble, surrounded by servants, wealth, and prestige. But she had made choices, some against her son's will, some that broke their bond, and in the bitter storm of pride and misunderstandings, she was cast out of his world. For years, she wandered, too ashamed to return, too proud to beg for forgiveness. The fortune she once commanded turned to dust in her hands, and she sank lower and lower until she became invisible to society. Zamir, in his towering glass office, built empires but carried a wound he never spoke of, the absence of the mother he had banished from his life. And while he dined in golden halls, his mother lay in the shadows, kept alive by a boy who had nothing but gave everything. One evening, as rain fell heavily and the streets turned to rivers, Armin rushed through the storm carrying a small bowl of soup someone had spared him. He shielded it under his ragged shirt, determined to bring it warm to the woman. When he arrived, soaked to the bone, he found her coughing violently, her body burning with fever. Panic shot through his small frame. "Don't leave me," he whispered, holding her hand. "Please, eat this, stay alive. Tomorrow will be better." She looked at him through feverish eyes, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Why do you care so much, child? You owe me nothing." Armin squeezed her hand tighter. "Because when I was small, I wished someone cared for me. I can't let you feel what I felt." Those words pierced her heart deeper than any wound of the past. She realized that love did not always come from blood, but from souls pure enough to give without reason. The next morning, when her fever worsened, Armin made the bold decision to seek help. He ran through the wealthy part of the city, begging outside clinics and hospitals, but no one listened to a dirty orphan. At last, by fate or miracle, he stood in front of the grand gates of Zamir Khan's mansion, shouting for help. Guards moved to push him away, but his desperate cries reached the ears of the billionaire himself, who happened to return from a meeting. "Please, sir," Armin begged, clutching the man's coat with trembling hands, "an old woman is dying. She needs a doctor. She's behind the church. Please don't let her die." Something in the boy's desperate eyes made Zamir pause. He ordered his men to follow. When they reached the spot, and the blankets were pulled back, Zamir froze, his breath caught, his heart thundered. The woman before him, fragile and broken, was his mother. Shock, guilt, and grief crashed over him like a tidal wave. He knelt, tears falling freely, whispering, "Mother, what have I done?" Miriam's weak eyes opened, and for the first time in years, they met her son's. But before she could speak, she pointed with trembling fingers at Armin. "It was him, this boy. He saved me when the world turned away." Zamir looked at the orphan, this thin, ragged child who had done what wealth and power could not, given his mother life. In that moment, Zamir saw more than a beggar. He saw purity, loyalty, and love greater than gold. He gathered his mother into his arms, swearing never to leave her again, and then turned to Armin. "From this day, you are not homeless. You are my son." And so, the boy who had once begged on the streets walked into a new life, not as a servant, not as a charity case, but as family. The mansion that had echoed with silence now filled with laughter, for Miriam, recovered and smiling, often told the story, that a little orphan with nothing had fed her every day, saved her from death, and healed a broken bond between mother and son. Zamir gave Armin the world, but more importantly, Armin gave Zamir and Miriam what money could never buy: love, forgiveness, and a reminder that even the smallest hands can carry the greatest power to change lives.